Okay, I'm Sal Donnarumma, and I sang with the Consorts, and we also called ourselves the Chuckles on one recording. And I also owned my own record company for a little while called Cool Sound. And I worked at Cousins Records on Fordham Road in the Bronx, New York for 8 years. So I met a lot of groups while I was working there also that Lou Cicchetti had recorded.
So before you started singing with these groups, growing up, what kind of music would you hear like on the
Okay,
radio and stuff?
yes. I had an older brother that was 5 years older than me. And when he was 18, he went into the Army. And he had a stack of 78 RPM records. And I started playing them at 13 years old. And some of the ones that I remembered playing was the Diamonds on Atlantic, Cherry, and Romance in the Dark. The Drifters, Lucille and Such a Night. And the Nutmegs, Ship of Love. I always loved the sound of the water and the ship noise at the beginning of the record. As I got a little bit older, I started buying my own records. Of course, I bought 45s. I didn't buy 78s because they were so fragile. And I remember some of the things that I bought when I was young. I bought To the Isle by the Five Satins, Church Bells May Ring by the Willows, Castle in the Sky by the Bop Chords. I bought all these records when they first came out. And that's what inspired me. I always liked the group sound. And when I was in high school in my senior year, Bill Abadie was putting together a vocal group, and he approached me in the hall one day and he said he would like for me to try out for it because he knew that I liked that kind of music. And he already had Eddie Jacobucci, and he still was looking for a lead singer. And there was this fellow called Bruce Laurent who was already in a group, but he was only doing like baritone or second tenor. And he knew that if he offered him to be the lead singer, he would come with us because he wanted to sing lead. And he did. And we used to meet at Bill's house on Prospect Avenue and Garden Street. And that's how it all started.
So you're at high school now. Were there any groups around that you used to like hear on the street corner at all? Or?
The only group that I remember is the group that Bruce Laurent was singing in. They had a talent show one day, and their group sang. And I think the group was, at that time was called the Concepts. Whether they made a record after that or anything, the group itself, because Bruce left them and came with us, I don't know. As far as groups singing on the corner, like in my neighborhood, the only one that would come to mind would be my wife's brother's group, the Visuals. Now, these aren't the Visuals that sang Submarine Race Watch. These were the Bronx Visuals. And they did a lot of demos, and they did do a master session. And it's on the CD that came out called The Bronx Doo-Wop Diaries, Volume 1 on Crystal Ball Records. But other than that, no. I don't remember. Of course, we came from the same neighborhood as Dion and the Belmonts. And Dion and the Belmonts were the inspiration for us to form a vocal group. At least Bill Abadie told me that's why he wanted to form. You have to see them on TV and all this and their big hits. We decided to form a vocal group.
So you have this vocal group now. Were you immediately the Consorts, or what? Did you have like an earlier name that you guys went by?
When we first started, we were calling ourselves the Majestics. And we practiced two songs that Billy had picked out. We practiced Traveling Stranger, which was done on an album by Little Anthony and the Imperials at the time, and Blue Star, which was done by the Mystics. And once we felt we had them down pat, we went down to Associated Studios in Manhattan, and we recorded both songs a cappella. We were told we had to come back in a week to get the demos, that they didn't do them right away. When we went back to get the demos and we brought them home and we played them, we found that they had music on them. They had added music. We found out later that Al Reno was working there, and he had John Falbo, who was a neighborhood friend of ours, but also he played guitar for Dion. He traveled with him and he played on some of his records. And he had added guitar and drum. At first we were a little apprehensive, but then we listened to them and we said, you know what, they sound pretty good with music. It's probably to our benefit when we bring them around to a record company to hear them with music. So Billy found out that Cousin's record store in Fordham Road in the Bronx was looking for talent, that they had just started a label and they had one record out by a blind group called the Camerons, called Cheryl. So Billy and I went one Saturday afternoon. We went up to see the owner, Lou Giacchetti. We played him our 2 demos, and he liked the sound of the group, but he said he only was interested in original material. So he said, find some original material. And he told us about Bruno Dean's studio in New Rochelle, New York. He said with the reasonable rates, and he had contact with them. And he said, record it there and then come back to me. So as time went on, I'm sure we didn't do it the following week or so, but as time went on, we went. Billy lived across the street from Ernie Maresca, who wrote a lot of songs for Dion and the Belmonts. He wrote No One Knows, and he wrote A Lover's Prayer at that time. He approached Ernie, and Ernie gave him 3 demos for us to use. Run Around, A Fool in Love, and A Mother's Love, which are on the EP that you have. And Eddie's brother, Don Jacobucci, had been in a group called the Regents, and they had recorded a song called Barbara Ann. Don gave his brother Eddie the demo and said, look, we're not singing anymore. We broke up, and maybe you want to use it as another original material, or original song. So we practiced all 4 songs. We went to Bruno Dean's studios with a couple of friends that played instruments. Jimmy Fracassi played guitar. Bobby Tribuzio played drums, and they went on to go with the Earls backup band. And we brought another friend of ours there who brought his trombone. We didn't know if we were going to use it, but we did on Run Around. We did use the trombone. But anyway, so we recorded the 4 songs, and we went back to see Lou Giacchetti. Well, he loved Barbara Ann. He said, yes, we were going to record Barbara Ann. Of course, Eddie told his brother, and his brother told some of the regents, and they decided to get back together and go see Lou Giacchetti with their demo. And when Lou Giacchetti heard their demo, it actually was almost a master session. He had someone overdub a bass fiddle to give the record a beat, and they never re-recorded it. They just used the old tapes and just re-recorded this bass over it. And of course, you know the rest of that. There was a top 10 hit. Anyway, to make matters worse, when the record became a hit, Roulette rushed him into the studio to record an album. And of course, Lou Giacchetti used Run Around and A Fool in Love. So we were left with only A Mother's Love and really not much of anything. So Billy and I decided we weren't going to let that happen again. And we were a little discouraged. We said, you know what? Let's write our own songs. He had an idea for Please Be Mine. I had an idea for Time After Time. And together we collaborated and we wrote both songs. We went to Bruno Dean Studios and cut 2 a cappella demos of them. brought him to Lou Cicchetti. Well, I was already working there. That's something I forgot to tell you. When we brought him Barbara Ann and that session, he said to me, "Are you working?" I said, "No, I'm still a senior in high school." He said, "How'd you like to work here in the evenings part-time?" This was like December. And he said, "We're getting close to the Christmas and I could use an extra person in the store." And I agreed, and I started working there besides, being our manager. And then, so Billy and I wrote Please Be Mine and Time After Time. And as I said, we went to Bruno Dean, recorded it a cappella, brought it to Lou. Lou liked both songs, but he said, "I'd like to hear it with music." So again, we took Jimmy Fracassi, probably Bobby Trabuzio. We went back to Bruno Dean and we recorded it with a drum and guitar. Brought it back to Lou, and Lou said, "Okay, we're going to record them. I like the songs." And that's how that came about. Now, that was the only record that never came out on Cousins. Labels were made, but the problem was that session was a twofold session. We recorded on the same night as the Camerons, the second Camerons group with Mike DiMartino that did Guardian Angel, and A Girl That I Marry was the flip side. And as I told you before, one of the members of the Camerons was sick. I think it was Al Chrissy, and he didn't make the session. And I think Eddie Jacobucci filled in for him on baritone so that they could cut the record. We all did the hand clapping. If you hear the record, it's got hand clapping. That's the Consorts and the Camerons clapping. But anyway, what happened was, after the session, well, by the way, on the session, we had studio, in those days, very famous people hung around studios in order to, musicians, in order to make money. On our record, we had Buddy Lucas play saxophone. We had A.B. Baker play bass guitar. We had Johnny Falbo play rhythm guitar. And I'm sure the drummer was a famous drummer, but I don't remember, who it was at this time. So what happened was, why it didn't come out on Cousins is after the session was over and we went back to our normal work day and whatnot, Lou decided to work on the Camerons record first. So he ordered that, he had it pressed on Cousins, and he had it out on Cousins for a little while. And then Feldstead, London was working with him on other projects, and Feldstead picked it up, which is a subsidiary of London Records. And of course it wasn't a hit. It was like, I don't know if it was the second or third time the record was out. It was out first by the Selections. And the only reason Lou recorded it, because he normally would not record cover versions, but Al Reno owned and claimed that he wrote the song. So he gave Lou permission, to have what they call it, the copyright or whatever. And so that's why he did it. He ordered labels for our record on Cousins, and before he could have it pressed, ABC Paramount, Bob Thiel stopped in the store. You see, when Barbara Ann was such a big hit, a lot of companies that turned it down would come and visit Lou because they were sorry they didn't take it. And Bob Thiel stopped in the store from ABC Paramount and asked Lou, "Do you have anything you're working on?" He played Please Be Mine and Time After Time for him. And Bob Thiel said, "I want that for ABC Paramount for the Apt record label," which was the label with Little Star and Bong Bong, Vince Castro, and a lot of other things. So Lou gave it to him that day. He had the tapes there and everything. And So he never got a chance to press it on Cousins. That's the reason, he didn't want to miss this opportunity. So that's why it didn't appear on Cousins. There's always been that mystique because the labels were printed, and I showed you one, and some of them leaked out, and there was always that impression that maybe there was copies of it, but no, it was never. That's the reason why it was never pressed on Cousins.
Wow.
So, I heard it once on Murray the K. That was after us all our friends calling in and asking him to play it. He finally played it. Now, I know it was released on the West Coast also, because I've seen copies from the West Coast, on the West Coast pressing. So I don't know what kind of airplay it might have gotten out there or not, but the record, of course, was still in the payola situation time, and of course, it didn't happen.
So I guess at this time you're making all these recordings with all these groups. Were you doing many shows at all?
No, the only show we ever did was back when we were still the Majestics, and we hadn't recorded for Cousins yet. We did a show in the Bronx. It was a church show that Laurie Records had put on, and we opened for the Passions, who were on Audicon, which was part of Laurie. It was part of the Laurie labels. And we did Traveling Stranger a cappella before they came on. And that was the only show that we ever did. When you don't have a hit. Now, there was some shows we did that a lot of people, did you ever read White and Still All Right by Ed Engel? Okay. Then there's a story in there about us going to Philadelphia as the Classics. They had broken up, or they had an argument or something, and Roger Sherman of Dart Records contacted Lou Cicchetti that he needed a group to go to Philadelphia for 2 nights at these record hops for these disc jockeys and lip sync the flip side of Cinderella, which was called I'm So in Love. We agreed to do it. A limousine picked us up, drove us to Philadelphia, and we went to these high schools, gymnasiums, and we changed in the kitchens into our clothes so they wouldn't be all wrinkled, because we had uniforms. And we lip synced it. By about the 3rd show on the first night, the disc jockeys knew we weren't the Classics. And I think they got a little angry at Roger Sherman. They must have called him, and he canceled the 2nd night. He said, no sense sending them because the disc jockeys are not buying it. And we tried to do the best we could. I mean, it wasn't our record. We did practice it for a while, before we went. So they brought us back home, bought us dinner, and we didn't do the 2nd night. But that's a funny story. That really did happen. I don't think Emil Stucchio knows, maybe he remembers, maybe he doesn't, that happened. But they got back together, and then, of course, they did the hit that they had. Till then. And I don't even know if they did that for Roger Sherman or not, but that was the story.
Cool. I guess another cool thing about your group is that you have so many group photos of your group. When did you take those?
Yeah, those, believe it or not, the pictures that you brought, those were taken at Bruno Dean Studios. They had a little area there with a curtain and that podium thing, and we took them there. The other pictures of the second Consorts group, which I showed you on the album, those were taken in somebody's apartment. It might have been Pete Costanza's apartment, but we took them in an apartment or Dennis's apartment. But we did take a lot of photos at Bruno Dean that day when we recorded Barbara Ann and all that stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And something you told me that I had no idea is that you were on that Mr. Fortune Teller.
Yes.
And is there any other records like that you did?
Well, you know what happened with that? While working at Cousins, every once in a while, Ernie Maresca or Frank Linden would come in and they would borrow me because they needed a first tenor. And Lou would agree to let me go because I was on the clock if they let him have first crack at whatever song I was going to get involved in. So Ernie Maresca came in and he wanted to borrow me. And of course, Lou said, okay, but don't forget, I get first crack. We went to Bruno Dean Studios with Guy Valeri, me, Ernie Maresca, and Frank Linden, and a couple of guys that I don't remember, you know. But anyway, and we recorded Unbelievable, which there is on some CD, that recording with Ernie Maresca singing lead. And later it was done by the Runarounds because Lou Cicchetti got the song because he lent me and whatnot. On that same session, Frank Linden wanted to cut Mr. Fortune Teller. And Frank sang lead. Guy did second tenor or first tenor. It was a collaboration. And we did one take without the falsetto that I did. And then, matter of fact, I even played tambourine on it, if you hit a tambourine in it. And the second one, I had the idea to do that floating tenor in the background on the top. And I did it, and they liked it, and that's the one that Ed Engelman had somehow he got it, and he put it out on the Crystal Ball. But that's how those things came about. There were probably other things that I just don't remember that, sessions like that. As a matter of fact, the Zircon session that you were asking about before, that was done at Bruno Dean Studios also. And Frank Linden happened to be there that night. And the Zircon sang background on Last Goodbye, if you've ever heard that song by Frank Linden. That's the Zircons behind him on Last Goodbye because he happened to be at the studio when we were recording Your Way and Lonely Way. Now, the way that came about, a friend of mine, while I was working at Cousins, stopped in to see me, Johnny Janguzzi. He had heard this group in Manhattan, and he wanted me to come and hear them. So I went with him on another night, when I wasn't working. And they sang Your Way for, the Heartbeats song. And Johnny set up a recording session at Bruno Dean Studios. I brought my electric guitar, and there was a guy at the studio who played piano. And that's what's on Your Way. My guitar playing and this piano, no drum. And Bobby Miller had heard them rehearsing one night. I guess they came up to Cousins. I don't think I was even there when they were there. And they were rehearsing to do the session. And the lead singer of the Zircon's name was Jimmy. I don't remember his last name. I have their contract somewhere, but anyway, the point I'm trying to make, he thought he sounded a lot like Jimmy Beaumont of the Skyliners. So he gave them a copy of Lonely Way. It happened today and Lonely Way. And when we did the session for Your Way, I didn't even know we were going to do that. I don't know if Bobby Miller came to the session or not. He might have. They decided to do Lonely Way also because they had been practicing it. That was a very intricate song. I couldn't play guitar, and the piano player couldn't, So we said, let's just record it a cappella. and we recorded it a cappella. So I was entrusted to find a label. I had taken it to Lou Cicchetti, that he wasn't interested. I played it for Eddie Grice at Relic Records. He said too many people had done Your Way. I took it to Slim at Times Square Records, played it for him. He was a tough character. So I was friends with Joe Marchesani and Tom Luciani of Time Capsule Show on WFUV out of Fordham University. Of course, we all lived in the Bronx. They invited me up to the radio station one night because, you know, they used to play my record and interview me a little. And I had told them about this record. And they said, bring it up. And I brought it up. And they said, let's play it over the air and let the people call in and vote on it, which side they like better. So they played Your Way, and then they played Lonely Way. And the phone calls were off the hook, and everybody liked Lonely Way. Bill Chabilsky had heard the show and contacted Joe because he knew him. He was going to college there too at the time. And Joe told him that Sal Donnarumma was, you know, trying to find a label for the group. He approached me and said he'd like to put it out. He's going to start a new label called Mellow Mood. Would he be able to put it out? So I thought it would be a good idea for the group to have a record out when going, you know. Most companies today, that day or that time, wanted original material. They didn't want to, you know, unless a song was a super hit and it hadn't been done in a long time. They wanted original material. But I still thought it was a good idea that they would have a record to show. They didn't see my point of view, and they decided to, you know, not get involved with Johnny and myself anymore. But anyway, it came out, and it was the beginning of a cappella. Matter of fact, Gus Gossett loved the record, played it to death. He even gave it away free. I don't know if he gave it away on Mellow Mood or it was pressed on something else. But if you bought his album, because I remember the advertisement on the radio on his show, you would hear Lonely Way in the background, and he would say, if you buy the album, you get the 45 of Lonely Way. But, you know, we're talking oldies now, you know, not mainstream. And, you know, radio stations weren't going to play it because of the musicians union. You couldn't play a cappella back then because it didn't have music and it violated their, you know, agreement or whatever. So that's how that came about. Then what happened was, a little while later, Joe Marchesani contacted Bobby Miller, or he came to the store to see both of us, but I wasn't there. And Bobby said to me, you know, Joe has this group, he's got this tape of 9 songs, and he said the group sounds like the Zircons, and he would like, you know, to know if you want to buy it. So him and I went up to WFUV. They had recorded it there. I think the group was called the Prophets at that time. And he played the tape for us. I don't know if we listened to all the songs, but there was one original song called I Hear Silver Bells, and the rest were all covers. Here in My Heart, Stormy Weather, You Are My Sunshine. So it did, I liked the way I Hear Silver Bells sounded like, and yes, the lead sounded a lot like Jimmy from the first Zircons group. He wanted $50 for the tape. Bobby put up 25, I put up 25, and we bought the tape. We brought it to Bruno Dean Studios, who was still using them. They were nice guys, Vinnie Dean and Anthony Bruno. And they were really terrific guys. They would do anything for you. We brought them there. They mastered them, ordered labels. We decided on Cool Sound, and we put the record out. Of course, It was a cappella, no airplay, other than an oldie station and whatnot. But we ordered 250 copies and we sold them all. I don't even have a copy anymore. Anyway, and that's how that came about. Bobby Miller eventually worked with the group, and I never met the group, to be honest with you. I never, beyond I Hear Silver Bells, for whatever reason, Bobby took over that, and he did his old-timer label, and he opened a record store in Queens called Disco Disc. I don't know if you know that. I went out to see him once there. And but we worked together a long time at Cousins Records. Then he eventually worked across the street at Music Makers. Then the other record that I could talk about before I talk about my group again was The Reactions, Just a Little Love. How that came about, I had left Cousins. I had gotten married. This was like 1965, 66. And I asked Lou Cicchetti to get me a job in Manhattan with somebody, one of the record companies. He was able to get me a job with Portum Record Distributors in Manhattan. And with the agreement that I work for him on Saturdays. I worked at Portum from Monday to Friday, and I worked at Cousins on Saturday. He wasn't ready to let me go. I agreed, and I went to work for Portum. I don't even remember how many years I worked for Portum, but it was a few years. I worked with a fella named Ralph. He lived in Astoria, Queens, and he had this group that he knew. They were bugging him because they knew he worked for a record distributor, and they wanted him to find a label for him for they had cut a session of 3 songs. Just a Little Love, Let Me Hang Around You, and a third song that I don't even remember what it was. Ralph said to me, listen, do me a favor. Bring these demos to Lou Cicchetti. See if he likes them and see if he'll put them out, if he'll. I brought him to Lou. Lou wasn't interested. Bobby Miller and I liked Just a Little Love. I thought it was a great record. I told Ralph, I said, Ralph, I have my own record label, Cool Sound. We haven't done much. We only have 1 record out. I said, but we would be willing to put the record out. Ask the group if that's okay with them. I'll draw up contracts. He asked them, and I guess they said yes. I drew up contracts. They signed them. They gave me the master tapes. We brought them to Bruno Dean Studios, and we pressed Just a Little Love on Cool Sound. And we weren't big enough to get, promotion and all that stuff. We tried to get it released on another label. As a matter of fact, we did. We got it released on Cloud Records. And we thought, maybe they would be able to get it airplay and whatnot, and it didn't happen. But the record was out on Cool Sound and on Cloud. And they're still recording today. And I spoke to John Scupoletti, I hope I said his name right because it's a difficult one, on the phone one day and introduced myself, and he remembered, the whole situation, and we had a nice conversation. And I asked him if he did the song when he does live shows. He's still doing live shows today with the Reactions. And he said, yes, once in a while they do Just a Little Love. And I said, because I always liked the record. That's why we put it out. And okay, so getting back to my group, with all this happening, between Cool Sound, the Zircons, the Reactions, we hadn't been doing much. One day, Billy calls me, Billy Abadie of the Consorts. He wants me to stop by his house, that him, Bruce, and Eddie were working on something, and they wanted my opinion. Now, we hadn't been singing for a while. we had kind of given up. And so I went to his house one evening, and they ran through On the Street Where You Live, of course, without me. And then they said, why don't you sing with us and let's try, and we did it. And I liked it. And Billy said, look, I got a guy, he didn't know I already knew him, Johnny Janguzzi, who's willing to pay for the recording session, and we don't even need Lou, because I wasn't even working there anymore. Well, I was working on Saturdays. He said, I want to record this on our own. Johnny's going to pay for the session, and we're going to record this on the street where you live. So, of course, we rehearsed it for a few weeks. Johnny set up the session at Belvedere Studios in Manhattan. We didn't go to Bruno Dean. And he hired the Earls band, Larry Chance and the Earls. Well, they had a band that they toured with, and with an organ player, and some of the guys in the band were people we knew. Jimmy Fracassi, the drummer at that time was probably Ronnie Calabrese, not the Bobby Trabuzio. And the organ player was a black fellow that played excellent organ. I wanted a sax break, so I brought Tony Hot Rod Gravagna from the Regents, who played the saxophone on Barbara Ann. I hired him to play the saxophone on the street where you live. And we went to Belvedere and we recorded it. Now, the reason Johnny was paying for the session, I didn't allude to that before, he wanted to do an up-tempo version of No One Knows, and he wanted us to back him up. And if we agreed to back him up, he would pay for the session. That's how that all came about. The problem is, it took us quite a few takes, not quite a few, but we were running out of time. The band, for some reason, couldn't play No One Knows. Don't ask me why, I don't know. And so they decided to record it a cappella and with a drum beat, just a drum beat, an a cappella. This way here, music could be added later, and that's what we did. Larry Chance showed up at the session just to see what his band was doing. And Lou Cicchetti showed up. I don't know if Bobby Miller told him we were recording or what. We were shocked to see him because we didn't tell him we were recording. He liked On the Street Where You Live and said, if you let him handle it, he will put it out and he will get a record company or try to get a record company for it. We had nobody in mind, so we said, okay. So that's how that came about. So then Lou Cicchetti took it, and he decided to change the name of the label from Cousins to West Side. And the reason for that was he felt that disc jockeys were hesitant to play it on Cousins because it was like an advertisement for the store. So he decided on West Side, even though it followed the numbering system of Cousins. I think it was 1013 we were up to by then. And he put it out. And he even got me an appointment with Capitol Records. And I went down there with On the Street Where You Live. And they played it a few times and hemmed and hawed. And they decided not to take it. We were getting into where Doo-Wop and that kind of music, ba 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 and all that kind of stuff was kind of fading out. And I guess they didn't want to take a chance on, that it was too late. And so Lou put it out on West Side. And as I told you, disc jockey in New Jersey, Danny Stiles, played it every day and every night. He must have loved the record because we didn't pay him to do it. And it made his list, and he played it along with a lot of famous oldies, even though it was a new record. And we started getting a lot of calls for it. And we even had to go into a second pressing of the record, probably about 1,000 total were pressed, maybe 500 the first time and 500 the second time. And after that, Bruce and Eddie decided they weren't going to sing anymore. I think they had even gotten married by then. This was like 1965 or so, 66. And Tommy Bogdani had approached us, thinking that we were still together, that he had 3 songs he wanted us to record. So we got together with 2 other members and formed a vocal group. It was me, Billy Abadie, Dennis Messiano, who sang with my brother-in-law's group, The Visuals, from the Bronx. Not the Visuals that did Submarine Race Watch, but the Visuals from the Bronx. And a friend of mine, Pete Costanza, a schoolmate of mine. And we formed a group, and we rehearsed these 3 songs that Tommy Bogdani wanted to record. Now, Tommy Bogdani is famous also. He wrote Come On Little Angel with Ernie Moresca, I think, for the Belmonts. And he also had his own group way back before he was really into writing, called Tommy and the Del Royals, Trust in Love. And that was even done on a label that had, I believe it had Cousins Records as the address. So Lou was involved with that. And he wrote a few songs for the Runarounds. So the songs were Star Above, Carrie, which the Runarounds had already done, but they did it like the Four Seasons. And Tommy didn't like that. He wanted it done the way he wrote it. So we did it the way he wrote it. And a song called Shake Shake, which was a dance thing. We went to a studio. I don't even remember what studio, to be honest with you. Tommy played guitar and he had a drummer. I don't even know who the drummer was. And we recorded the songs with the new, we didn't even have a name at that time that we were using. When Ed Engel put the record out on Crystal Ball, that he had gotten it from Tommy for somehow, which shocked me because I didn't even know that that happened. That was 1977 already. I go to the post office, there's a package for me. I didn't know what it was. I knew who Ed Engel was. I was in contact with him since he was in the since I was in the Bronx. And I opened it up and it's 3 copies of Star Above and Carrie, the flip side, on Crystal Ball, that he had put it out by the Consorts. I said, okay, we could say we were the Consorts. The 2 of us were the Consorts anyway. Of course, I mean, it sold to collectors, I'm sure, but other than that, I don't know. But that's how that session came about. And that's why it's different members that I showed you pictures of them.
Was that the story?
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's cool. So I guess after that session you had, did you kind of get
No, then we moved. I had already, I think I wasn't up here yet. Then I moved out of the city. I moved up here. And I was still working at Cousins, living up here. Actually, not here, in Chester, New York. You pass Chester coming up here. And I was still working on Saturdays for Lou. Until eventually, the weather, the snowstorms, I went into ditches and trying to get to work. Finally, I said, you know what? It's time for me to find a job up here and not commute to the city anymore. And that session, Star Above, and that was the last time we recorded anything, any involvement.
And that was the end of the groups for you, or did you kind of have like groups here and there that you would just sing for fun with? No.
Well, I did. A friend of mine that lived up here, he moved to North Carolina. The memory Anyway, his name will come up. Oh, Fred Paps. He sang with Heart's Desire and a few other groups. One of the groups, Sentimental Journey, was looking for a first tenor. And he said to me, I worked with him at Bosie's here in Goshen. He said, why don't you try out for the group? I said, I don't know, I'm quite old right now. This was about maybe 10 years ago. So I was in my 70s. But I said, all right. So I went and we rehearsed a few nights and I sang with them. And it was a little, my voice had dropped. I wasn't really comfortable, but I was able to do. But they practiced very late. I didn't get home one night till 1 o'clock in the morning. My wife was, she said, you can't do this. I said, no. I said, it's too much anyway. And so that was about it as far as after everything. I did some interviews. I did a few radio interviews over the telephone, and I did an interview with Ed Engel for his book, White and Still All Right, and Out of the Past, another magazine. But other than that, no.
I guess after the group is done, did you still hang out with those guys in the concerts?
No, we all moved away from each other. Bruce and Eddie Bruce lives in Florida. Eddie came to my 50th birthday. He was living in Warwick, which is not too far from here. But then he moved he got married and moved to Florida. Billy lives in Selden, New York, which is a 2-hour ride. I've been to his house. And then, of course, I live here. And so, no way. Billy, Eddie, and Dennis Messiano, who sang lead on Star Above, came to my 50th birthday in Circleville, which is not far from here, and we sang. There's a video of it somewhere. And we did Traveling Stranger and a few things at my birthday party. But other than that, no. Now, the EP that you have, I didn't mention that. I became friends after going to Clifton Music a lot. I had discovered Clifton Music like around 1976. I was going to college in Queens, and somebody told me about the record store, and I went there, and I met Ronnie Ronnie I. And when I was living here, I knew that it was not that far, to go there. And me and my friend Bernie would go there. And I mentioned to Ronnie I that I had the tapes from the original session when we did Barbara Ann that we brought to Lou Cicchetti that got him all interested in the song. And I also had a demo of it. And he said he thought he would like to put it out as an EP, all 4 songs with a picture sleeve and the whole thing. So we worked together, I gave him the information and whatnot, gave him the tapes, and he put it out. And I know it sold well in the store. I don't know how many he did, but that's how that came about, just from going to the record store, his record store. At that time, I think I was only buying albums and CDs at the time. And I mentioned it to him, and he got interested in it. He said, it was part of musical history, and he thinks, it would sell, and he would like to put it out. And I agreed, and we did it. Not that I'm sorry or anything, but, it was really done for collectors more than anything.
Did you ever go to any of his shows? Ronnie's shows?
No, I was a member. I was always a member because I felt it was like a contribution to him, for him to keep going. But I never, it was hard for me. My wife really wasn't interested in that music so much. and it was only me, and what was I going to do? Go by myself? And then nobody ever said, Sal, I'm going. You want to come? So I never got a chance to go to any of his shows, but I heard they were pretty good.
Yeah, I've seen some footage. It seemed pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess that's the story of the
That's
concert.
about it. I don't know if I could add anything else.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the people who are going to be watching this?
No, just I hope you liked my music and the songs that we did. And it was fun doing them at the time. And I'm happy and I'm grateful that so many people, like on Facebook, I must have over 2,000 friends. Most of them are my friends because of the music. And I'm just happy that a lot of people that have heard my music have said that it was very good and they enjoyed it very much. And I want to say thank you to all the people who bought them in one way or another, whether it was on a 45 or an album or on a CD. Thank you very much.
Thank you.